welcome to episode 6 of Low Key Track, the podcast where I, DJ V, discuss the low key track of an album, or the least streamed song on one. On today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Freewheelin Bob Dylan. Yep, the legendary Bob Dylan, his second album, and its low key track. For those who don't necessarily know who Bob Dylan is, he's a singer-songwriter originally from Duluth, Minnesota. He sold more than 125 million records worldwide, so that makes him one of the best-selling musicians in the history of music. He's also been cited by many critics, many fans, just general fans of music, as one of the best, if not the best lyricist ever, and has incorporated multiple political, social, philosophical themes within his music. He also received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2016 for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. And he's recently been revitalized in popular culture due to the TikTok trend Bob Dylan Core, and also A Complete Unknown, that new Bob Dylan biopic where he's portrayed by Timothée Chalamet. So I wanted to talk about this album and the low-key track on it because I've been listening to this album pretty regularly this winter. I think Bob Dylan is great. When I first heard him, it was actually, when I was a kid, generally you would hear, like, Times They Are Changing, Like a Rolling Stone, Blowing in the Wind. You've heard these songs kind of throughout, at least for me, throughout my childhood, like whether teachers have played them or whether they've just been in like old movies or old pieces of media, or rather older. Ugh. And that is where I was first exposed to Bob Dylan. And ironically, I think where it actually started to really come together for me was college and How I Met Your Mother. In How I Met Your Mother, and I think the either third to last or fourth to last episode of the show, there's a scene where Ted is sitting with his with the mother, and the end of the episode has the song "If You See Her Say Hello" playing, which is a beautiful, beautiful song. And that's when I started to really deep dive into Bob Dylan and try to learn about him more and listen to a lot of his songs. So I heard Blood on the Tracks as an album, and I heard If You See Her Say Hello, and I'd already heard the other songs that I just mentioned. And then a old professor recommended me some additional Bob Dylan songs and some additional albums. And then I kind of started listening to him a little bit more regularly, but kind of fell off because, I was in college and I was too obsessed with finding, the top hits and things like that. But relatively recently, in the last 6 or 7 months, I've come to start to appreciate Bob Dylan more and a lot of his music. I have friends that are big fans, and I really enjoy this album. And I'm going to continue to deep dive into Bob Dylan because he has so much music. But this is the first album of his that I've just really been latched onto. So, want to get into the low-key track, which is Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance. As of this recording, it has just over 4.1 million streams. And the top track on this album is To No Surprise, Blowing in the Wind, over 223 million streams. Considered one of Bob Dylan's signature songs, one of his best songs. But I want to know why Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance is the low-key track. And just curious, why is that? Well, here's what I think. To start things off, this is one of 2 tracks on the album that is not written by Bob Dylan. Obviously, Bob Dylan has been lauded throughout his musical career just for his lyricism and for his songwriting. And his first album actually did not have very many original songs. I think maybe only 2 of the songs on his first album were original compositions. So this is his second album, and the inverse happened. Only 2 of the songs on this album are covers, and the rest are original compositions. Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance is one of those covers, and the other song is Corinna, Corinna. That's the other one that is a cover. They're old blues songs that Bob Dylan was inspired by and that he wants to add to his musical catalog as covers on this album. So, as I mentioned, Dylan was starting to get some exposure. This album really catapulted him into pop culture, and his songwriting abilities were incredibly praised, and he himself started to gain some more traction as a songwriter, as a musician, and it's really interesting to kind of see his climb and just how good he was at such an early stage of his musical career. There are so many incredible songs on this album: Blowing in the Wind, Masters of War, Bob Dylan's Blues, but just want to get back on track. Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance is what we're focusing on. And it's interesting to see his creative process and looking at some of the songs that have inspired him. because you can see, and I'm not going to say I'm an expert here. I think there are much bigger Bob Dylan fans than me, much bigger blues fans than me, much bigger folk fans than me, that can probably have additional insight into this. But to me, it just seems like when I was listening to some of the original songs that he covered, there's certain rhythms and certain melodies and just certain structures he would take and try to incorporate his own twist into it. And this one is a little bit interesting because it feels like he's changed like a lot on this cover compared to the original song. So this brings me to my second point as to why I think this is the low-key track on this album. It's actually the way that he covers this song. So the original song was recorded by a blues musician named Henry Thomas in 1927 and is a lot darker than Dylan's version. So for those that haven't listened to the song, either or, the original song by Henry Thomas has more of a darker tone to it, and it seems to be about getting his wife to forgive him from just his general alcoholism and shitty behavior, and he's asking for one more chance. Whereas Bob Dylan's version seems to be more so he's trying to get a one-night stand with an old flame, and it doesn't seem to be going beyond that. So I think this is kind of interesting as to how he took some of the structures and the lyrics from the original Henry Thomas song and sort of changed it to completely alter the interpretation. And that's pretty fascinating to me. And perhaps, and again, I won't call myself a blues purist. I won't call myself like a massive folk fan. But there's a good chance that at the time and even now that people who are massive folk music fans, blues music fans, just did not like this cover because it completely changed the interpretation of the song. Or maybe they're like, these songs should not be covered. Henry Thomas's version reigns supreme. And I think this is probably a sufficient reason as to why I think maybe this song is the low-key track, just because it's just a completely different take on the original song. And the other thing is that it's also one of the shorter songs in the album. So I know that nowadays in music especially, we're more geared towards like shorter songs just because attention spans have just been crap with the rise of social media and short-form video and just how content is consumed. But there was a time where, shocker, this wasn't a thing, and people had longer attention spans and continue to have longer attention spans from that generation. So maybe they just didn't like shorter songs at that point in time. Not to say that that's completely untrue, because the most popular song in this album, Blowin' in the Wind, is just clocking under 3 minutes, about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and this one is about 1:58. So I think it's just a matter of this is sort of like a flash in the pan compared to the rest of the songs in this album, because when you're looking at Bob Dylan, when you're looking at this album, you want to hear what Bob Dylan has to say, and you want to hear what Bob Dylan's feelings are on the world. And at this time, there are a ton of thoughts that Bob Dylan has. Songs like Blowin' in the Wind and Masters of War are incredibly counterculture, protest anthems. Just talking about the state of humanity and the evils that it can do, and also very anti-war in his mindset. And these became staple songs of 1960s counterculture. And then there's also songs like Bob Dylan's Dream, songs like Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, that cover, different aspects of humanity, just dreaming, flying free, love songs as well. And it creates this all-encompassing portrait of who Bob Dylan is, what Bob Dylan was at the time, and how he really laid the groundwork to have an incredibly successful music career. And this is just a case of, hey, I want to show you, the listener, some of the songs that inspired me. And this is why he covered the song. He wanted to basically showcase that, but also flex his songwriting abilities. And that this being sort of a flash in the pan kind of song compared to the rest of it, because while I do enjoy this song, when you see the other songs of this album, and you listen to the songs of the album, you can really see that this is a very much not as necessarily lyrically deep as the other songs on this album. And I think that people were looking for much higher lyricism in terms of quality from Bob Dylan. And this song, while it is a great song, just doesn't capture that realm of songwriting. So these are the reasons why I think Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance is the low-key track of the Freewheelin Bob Dylan. Of course, if this is your personal favorite song on the album, that is awesome. Again, for me, the purpose of music is to continue to build a connection with yourself at a deeper level and create healthy ways to discover expression of yourself as a human being as you navigate life. So thanks for listening to the 6th episode of Low Key Track. This is available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow me on social media at Low Key Track. I also DJ at The Fake DJV, so you can follow that to find some cool DJ mixes and content there. Until next time, honey, won't you give me one more chance?